Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 numbers are in. We've got 114 domestic, and 282 global. What do these numbers mean? Well, they're not game over, but they're not great either. Let's discuss. So first off, is this bad for Hollywood overall, that the movie kicking off their summer movie season didn't quite deliver? Nah, Super Mario Brothers just made $1 billion. In fact, I suspect that for most moviegoers, how do you feel? Super Mario Brothers is the movie that kicked off the 2023 summer movie season. And come to think of it, since they kind of didn't open any movies in April after that, and then there aren't a lot of movies opening in May until the end of the month with Fast X and The Little Mermaid, maybe people just got distracted and are doing other stuff. You know, you gotta form a habit, man. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot to unpack. But I think that Super Mario Brothers kicked off the 2023 summer movie season, not Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And there's a precedent for this, because April can be a big month. Both Infinity War and Endgame opened in late April, and Captain America Winter Soldier opened at the beginning of the month in 2014, and just like Super Mario Brothers, did boffo business. Heck, Fast and Furious has done quite well in April. A number of their films have opened in that month, and in fact, it's two of their biggest. Their two biggest movies opened in April. Furious 7, the biggest, was also at the beginning of the month. The first weekend of April is starting to look like another really good release date. And inexplicably, nobody really big has it booked for next year. The beginning of April is a very good date. You know, even if, Super Mario is still able to make $1 billion before the summer movie season started. So even though Disney has that, first weekend of May locked down forever, that doesn't mean clearly that another movie still can't make a lot of money in the month beforehand. So I'm still bullish for this summer. I think that there are a lot of strong movies coming down the pipeline, and even a couple of $1 billion contenders. Fast X, The Little Mermaid, and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. I still feel very good about those movies. Yeah, I still feel good about The Little Mermaid. I think it could do quite well still. But as for Marvel, James Gunn, and superhero movies in general, jury's still out. So, see, 114 is pretty underwhelming, right? It's right where Quantumania opened, and we all know how that turned out. But also, Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man Homecoming also opened in the same zone. Yet Spider-Man Far From Home eventually became $1 billion picture, and Spider-Man Homecoming almost got to $900 million. So with really strong audience scores and a solid critic score, I still think James Gunn has ticked off a lot of the major outlets, but the fan sites are still backing him. But I think there's a chance this film, we're going to talk a little bit more about James Gunn, but I still think there's a chance this film could have a strong second weekend, hold, and play throughout the month of May and make its money before Fast X and Little Mermaid show up. A second weekend drop, if it's just even in the 50s, if it has a 6 in front of it, it's not going to be great. But even if it was like 58, I would be like, that's good. Woo! That would make me feel good. I do not think that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 even though Far From Home got there, I think because of the problems we're going to discuss with Marvel, I don't see it becoming $1 billion picture. But I do still think it has a shot at getting around $800 million, which in my opinion is the new threshold for MCU movies. I think it can still do that. But here are the potential warning signs. Ooh, okay, for you doom and gloomers, here we go. It would seem Quantumania might have done real damage, especially coming after Multiverse of Madness and Thor Love and Thunder. What a lineup. And throw Ms. Marvel and She-Hulk in there as well. Too much content. That bottom line, no matter how you feel about it, you have to agree that it has shed MCU fans. Either because it was too limited in appeal, the Disney Plus shows, even if you like them, you have to agree they made no effort to have broad appeal. They were like, you have to like this because it's the right thing to do and because it's Marvel. And a lot of fans said, no, I don't. And that has been a problem. And then also the writing. The writing may or definitely stunk. And whoa, what do we have here? A writer's strike? Ah, the delicious irony. Now, the MCU has never had Oscar-nominated writing, but it's gotten really sloppy. Michael Waldron said he didn't even bother to watch WandaVision. Why did he admit that? It's going to haunt him forever. And he was writing the sequel to WandaVision, but he didn't feel it was important to watch it. And director Sam Raimi, though, let's spread out the blame. Sam Raimi's like, I didn't watch it either. And we're all like, what? Why weren't you made to watch it? When I was an elf at Santaland, they made you watch Miracle on 34th Street. I'd seen it many times, and they still, I was happy to watch it again, but you had to sit there and watch it, and they watched you watch it. Rick and Morty writers, they've done real damage to the MCU, and it's pretty shocking that at least 2 of those dudes are still contracted for work at Marvel to write the upcoming Avengers movies. And with the writer's strike, are those scripts now locked in for better or worse? I don't know about you, but I suspect we'd all rather those movies be delayed rather than moving ahead with those writers. Speaking of writing, did James Gunn shoot himself in the foot with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? I've been saying for quite some time that he has a tonal issue. That was one of my biggest problems with the Suicide Squad, and I do believe that affected its success. Some of you, we don't know what the HBO Max numbers were, but we can see the box office ones, and it fared worse than other movies that debuted day and date on HBO Max. But also, I loved Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I thought it was a home run, but it still might not have as broad appeal as it needs to. Did families with small children decide to stay home? It's a genuine, something's going on here. So that's why we're hitting all the possibilities. Because again, as I said, I thought it hurt Suicide Squad. The demographics for this movie are fine. They're not on fire. They're not great. But it's a little male heavy. And I think in terms of African-American moviegoers, that number it would be nice to see it a little higher. But overall, it's fine. But back to, with the situation with the animal cruelty, we've been discussing that ever since that came, we've been discussing the Rotten Tomatoes score for a couple of days now, and I think the animal cruelty has presented itself as a real issue. And sometimes, you don't realize that when you're testing a film. Everybody who's watching it is like, oh, you're firing on all cylinders, this is really great commentary, but then you release it to the general public, and a lot of people are like, I don't care how brilliant it is, it's a no-go for me. And I've seen people saying that. So I think it's affecting some people who just don't see the film at all. And a number of people have also said they went to the movie, loved it, but they can't watch it again because of the animal cruelty. And repeat viewing is crucial to get those big sky-high box office numbers. So that's something that I think is going to be very worrying coming down the track. Joker was dark. Joker was smart. I would argue that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is dark and smart. But maybe Gunn's sophomoric humor undercuts his commentary, and people just don't give it the same cachet or epic quality that the Joker enjoyed, right? That even though some of us, again, here's the thing. Some people feel that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, like myself, is a home run. But it's not enough people. That's the issue. And we'll see if word of mouth carries it forward in the weeks ahead. But out of the gate, something was wrong. So now Marvel, tone issues. Now let's talk about James Gunn. Perhaps James Gunn should consider dialing it back, not just with his social media presence, but his presence overall. He's really been putting himself out there. I noticed his dapper looks on the red carpet. He clearly hired a stylist. Not a lot of directors do. And it was a choice. Maybe it was the wrong one. Of course, it'll take a couple of movies to figure that out. But again, it's something to consider when they have the whiteboard up there and be like, why didn't this movie do as well as it should? Because James Gunn was supposed to be like a big selling point for this movie. But yet he did not sell it to a big enough opening. Now, sure, the way he's handling himself has definitely won him some diehard loyal fans. But even actors will tell you when you become too big, you lose the ability to disappear into your work. Dwayne Johnson, Margot Robbie, right? Also, when you have a big, strong, specific personality, you start to limit your appeal. You don't want anyone to have too strong an opinion on you because that might keep them from seeing your movie, no matter how good it is. Some people just might have an issue with you. And I think Gunn has, in a couple of areas, taken very strong stands, and he has a scandal, which again, I feel maybe he's not totally recovered from based on the performance of his work ever since. But again, he still has that core loyal fan base, so I think he'll always work. But can he still deliver a 4-quadrant giant blockbuster? I think that remains to be seen. Overexposure, though, even beyond scandals or the way he handles himself, overexposure can be a problem, even for directors. How often do you hear directly from Spielberg, Nolan, Coogler, right? Even someone like Tom Cruise. Let the work speak for you rather than having to compete with you. James Gunn worked very hard to promote this movie on social media. He went out, he was on the red carpet, he did everything he could. He really worked hard. I saw him tweeting all weekend long, trying to get people to go to the theater. He went the distance for this movie, and it wasn't enough. So that's something that also has to be considered. All right, now let's talk about the potential of superhero fatigue. Some people are ready for it. They're like, oh yeah, here it comes. And other people are like, no, you shall not pass superhero fatigue. But I think it's got one toe over the line at least. The MCU has been so successful that it not only has oversaturated the marketplace itself, but because of its success, everyone else has jumped into the pool, on the big screen and the small screen. Plus, as the MCU continues to mostly play it safe, even their bold choices are still really kind of playing it safe for the most part. Not this movie, though. This movie took risks with the animal cruelty, and, look what's happening. So it's tough. It's tough to take risks. It's tough, but then sometimes you have a slam dunk. But anyway, speaking of risks, other superhero stories are digging deeper and are more sophisticated. Joker, I would say The Batman, The Boys, Invincible. And so the traditional, safer superhero stories become a harder sell, especially when there's such a crowded marketplace. And then other genres are starting to excite people because they're a change of pace. Video game content is starting to become really hot. And last year, none of the billion-dollar movies were comic book films. Although, to be fair, 4 of the top 10 movies were still comic book films. So yeah, I'm not saying comic book movies are dead. They gotta be smarter. I think audiences are becoming more selective, again, because of the overcrowded marketplace, but also because they've been burned. I think they consider characters, quality, not just of the film itself, but of the franchise, and scope of appeal. Quantumania and Shazam 2 have been duds so far this year, and so we'll see how the rest of the year shakes out. After Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, there are still 6 comic book movies to go this year, and on streaming, we have at least 7 shows coming out this year, and we're almost halfway through the year. Oh, and the new DC isn't even fully operational yet, with James Gunn and Peter Safran. That's right, Pete, I remembered you. He's like, please don't. They've already made it clear that they intend to flood the market. I wouldn't say out of the gate, but in their early days, just like the MCU. They're like, we're here, and you're like, maybe you should set up a foundation first. And they're like, nah, we got to make up for lost time. And you're like, look at these numbers, maybe you should slow it down. As for the rest of the top 10, going up against the big new Marvel movie didn't slow down Super Mario Bros. Or Evil Dead Rise that much, as they both had strong holds, considering they fell just both around 55%. That's impressive. And they're in their 5th and 3rd week out, That's really good. Super Mario Bros. Has passed 500 million domestic, which makes it number 17 on the all-time list for domestic, and it could still play all the way up until The Little Mermaid opens at the end of the month. However, it also becomes available for digital purchase Tuesday, May 16th. Quantumania hitting Disney Plus the day after. That's going to be a week. And it should be a juggernaut. Super Mario Brothers will be a juggernaut on digital, even for purchase, because people are going to want it. That's going to be the new babysitting movie. Oh, people are going to pay for that. So I think that will cool its box office, potentially, at least a little. But it still has one more weekend to go before it hits digital. But I still don't see, it would take another 135 million to get it into the all-time top 10 domestic, and I don't see that happening, especially because it's down to under 20 million this weekend. I mean, again, with this movie, never say never, but I think it's highly unlikely. Globally, it currently sits at number 25, right behind the first Minions, interestingly enough, another Illumination movie. At this point, I also don't think it will crack the top 10 worldwide either. But it's still very impressive. These are such impressive numbers, especially for animation. No animated movies are in there at all, I don't believe. I forgot to check before I did my notes here. But I think, and I think it's still very strong. I mean, it doesn't have to obliterate Disney, but it's certainly operating at the level of Disney. So this is great. And I do believe this is a game changer for video game adaptations in Hollywood, along with The Last of Us. I know a lot of you like to say Arcane, but Arcane, while successful, did not register at this level. Maybe its season 2 will. But also, this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, along with the theme park lands that are opening for Universal and Nintendo. Oh boy. All right, and Evil Dead Rise has passed the century mark globally. Now, usually we don't talk about the century mark globally. I saw Evil Dead tweeting about it. They were like, $100 million. And I was like, domestic? Because that's usually the marker. But I don't blame them for celebrating. For a movie that was originally supposed to go directly to HBO Max, that's impressive. Stay tuned. Evil Dead Rise hits digital on Tuesday. All right, so we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but it's exciting. The rest of the top 10 is pretty uneventful, just movies picking up what cash they can before heading to digital themselves. Although Dungeons & Dragons just hit digital this past week, and you can see suffered a pretty big drop as a result. It was holding much better before that. Love Again was another new entry from Sony this time, and that was barely advertised and therefore barely made a dent with its debut. Over on streaming, let's start with Nielsen for the first full week of April. The Night Agent is still doing very well, while Mando is doing well. And Ted Lasso is hanging on there, man, still able to make at least the overall top 10 list. The real story, though, here is Beef, coming in strong in just its first week, with just half the week there. It opened midweek. And so you'll likely see it go up next week in next week's Nielsen charts, because we know this was a slow burn, relying heavily on word of mouth. But speaking about what people are talking about, with the David Cho controversy, one has to continue to wonder, we're still wondering, if that will haunt the creative team as they head over to the MCU's Thunderbolts. You can be sure that will be brought up when they are promoting that movie. And also, will Netflix greenlight a season 2? Some of you pointed out that the creator of Beef says he's got 2 more seasons in him. Although they will be delayed, not only because they're doing Thunderbolts now, the writer included, but also the writer's strike. There's a writer's strike. He ain't writing anything right now. And so I think the writer's strike will put a pin in the question of a Beef season 2, and perhaps a welcome pin considering that controversy. Over on the OG chart, Ted Lasso looks a little better here. It's not a great number, but good for Rob Lowe. His half-hour comedy with his son Unstable managed to place. Its season 2 was just halted during filming because of the strike. And Rob Lowe's recent movie, by the way, that dog movie, was able to place really high in the movie charts just a few months ago. So Rob Lowe, he and Netflix are having a pretty nice relationship themselves. Over on Acquired, although Adam Sandler's like, you got to get me some better people to compare myself to here, man. All right, so anyway, I got to sit next to these people on the bench. Adam Sandler did it to himself, though. All right, so anyway, over on Acquired, Succession is holding steady towards the bottom of the chart. And it's its second week on the charts, basically. But this, it's legendary episode 3, considered one of the greatest episodes of television of all time. That only aired at the very end of this window, April 9th. And I bet a lot of people jumped onto the show after that episode exploded on social media. So we'll see if it's able to get a little higher in the weeks ahead. But again, just because this HBO Max show dominates social media on Sunday nights does not mean that everybody is actually watching it. But, still, it's got a Succession. No, nothing against Succession, but just realize it's not a Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. It's not The Last of Us. It's not even a Mando in terms of viewership. Although, Succession has tons of seasons. But this isn't its full audience either. But more people are switching over to streaming. And so I think this is pretty representative. All right, the movies chart. Not particularly interesting once again, and the numbers continue to be bleak. But over on Netflix's charts for just last week, well, the numbers suck here too. Number 1 is number 1. So congrats to Rachel Lee Cook. Good for her. She's making a comeback, maybe. And also the Whitney Houston bio. Now, these movies are both in their second weeks on Netflix, but hey, they held on while everything else around them sank. And so, by the way, the Whitney Houston bio is on here because don't forget, Sony has no streaming service. They're starting to make other deals, like their Napoleon movie will also be on, it'll go to Apple TV right away after its theatrical release. But for most of their movies, they have a deal where after they go through the digital pay window with rentals and purchases, then they go to Netflix. So this is the latest one, and they do pretty well on Netflix. So I'm glad that people are finally watching the Whitney Houston movie. It's not amazing, but it's a great streaming movie, and I think it had a lot of interesting insight into her life. I loved learning about how she handled herself as a businesswoman. And I thought it was very respectful to her as well. All right, as for series for the last week, The Diplomat is holding at number 1 and was renewed right before the strike, as was Sweet Tooth for its final season. That's doing okay, but it did manage to bring the first season back to the top 10 as well. Here we see Beef later in its scandal, interestingly, and it's still managing to hold in its 4th week, so it doesn't seem to have hurt the show too much. On iTunes, huzzah! Dungeons & Dragons is a badly needed number 1. I'm not saying it's going to get a sequel, but at least this makes it a little less embarrassing. Well, Avatar is also, maybe they'll do like a Paramount Plus like series or something, you know? I mean, it's a great movie, and so it's just a shame what happened to it. March was too crowded. Beware, June movies. You could have the fate of Dungeons & Dragons. Well, Avatar is still doing very well, holding off other new releases, The Pope's Exorcist and Renfield, which are right behind it. Meanwhile, Quantumania slipped to number 6 as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 hit theaters, but interestingly, they had a sale of Guardians actors and their other work, and Chris Pratt's Amazon movie The Tomorrow War, which I guess some of you didn't watch because you don't have Prime Video, that jumped into the top 10. That's a solid watch. Dune is also on sale, as the trailer for part 2 just dropped, so they're like, catch up on Dune, and some people said, I will, thank you very much, and that cracked the top 10 too. But Mafia Mama, which also just hit digital, is struggling here as it did at the box office. As for this coming week, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is getting a bit of a gimme, at least in theaters, with just Book Club 2 opening wide, while Hypnotic, Robert Rodriguez's new Ben Affleck movie that somehow has a $70 million budget, yet is being released in just a handful of theaters by Ketchup Entertainment, who has never released a major motion picture before. I mean, they released some pictures that did a couple $100,000, but what's happening here? And also Japan's Night of the Zodiac, based on the long-running manga and anime franchise, and it has some Hollywood names, which I think actually might hurt it, opens stateside, also in limited release. But online, here's where you got a plethora of choices. On digital, as I said, Evil Dead Rise is coming out already for purchase. Remember, it goes purchase first. Warner Brothers following Universal here. And now every studio does this. It'll be for purchase only, and then eventually after a few weeks you'll be able to rent it. But I think Evil Dead Rise is going to do great on digital. And then Air hits Prime Video, the studio that made it. They put it in theaters first, but it's finally hitting Prime at no extra cost this Friday. Great movie. I highly recommend you watch it if you didn't catch it in theaters. Both those movies are great. It's going to be a good week. On streaming, new movies, direct to streaming, all on Friday are The Mother on Netflix. Disney Plus has Crater, which is like some kids' moon movie. And then Apple TV has the Michael J. Fox documentary. As for shows, Wednesday, The Muppets Mayhem starts on Disney Plus, and the already controversial Queen Cleopatra drops on Netflix. While on Friday, The Great, huzzah indeed, that's been used a lot lately. That returns on Hulu. They drop the entire season. Queer Eye drops on Netflix. They come back too. And Apple TV starting a new show every week, man. Advertise this stuff. None of it, but Ted Lasso is in the charts. But some of the stuff on Apple TV is so good, though. All right, Apple TV, and it's one of the cheapest services. But Apple TV starts City on Fire from the creative team behind the OC. Remember that teen drama? That sounds like worth checking out, maybe. So that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what are your thoughts on what's going on with the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 opening weekend? It's a multi-layered situation, so I look forward to hearing your complex thoughts. Share them down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.